Hello, welcome to my channel. Today I'll be doing a sketchbook study instead of a painting. I recently decided to buy a new sketchbook, so I'll be working in that today. Feel free to grab your own sketchbook and draw along with me, or just watch and listen. So yes, I am the type of artist who will buy and start new sketchbooks even though I have many that are in progress. However, I justified this one because lately I've been feeling like I should work on larger pieces in general, and I don't have a nice sketchbook of that larger size that I want. I do have a 9x12 drawing paper sketchbook, but it's one of those spiral bound ones that feels like it's more for warm-up drawings or scratch paper rather than drawings I'll actually like. In order for me to want to work in a sketchbook, I have to be inspired by the outside to some degree. This is why I sometimes will buy sketchbooks with cute covers but then really dislike the paper inside and not want to work in it. That's kind of how I'm feeling about a few of the sketchbooks I'm partway through right now. One is textured in a way I don't love, and one is a small square sketchbook, so size-wise I'm not sure how to lay out my spreads. It's annoying that little things like this bother me, but that's the truth of it. Anyway, so far I like this sketchbook quite a bit. It's a Strathmore mixed media sketchbook, and the main reason I got it was because I've heard Lee Ellickson rave about it. If you don't know who she is, she's an amazing artist who posts lots of art-related videos here on YouTube, and works with a variety of mediums, such as gouache, colored pencils, pens, etc. You should definitely check her out if you haven't already. Anyway, the paper is similar to the Stillman & Byrne one I was using a while back, and I like it because it feels good to draw and paint in. The paper is kind of rough, which feels good to use pencil on. I think my issue with my other sketchbooks is they're too smooth. It almost feels like there's a plasticky layer on them, which is annoying when I work in pencil. Other mediums like pens or markers work fine on them, but I don't tend to work loosely in those. I do wish I was the type of person to work in just pen, but I'm not comfortable with it yet, which brings me to the process of today's studies. As you've seen by now, in today's sketchbook session I'm working with pencil, pen, and marker. I first loosely lay down a pencil sketch, then ink the lines with a brush pen, and finally scribble with some markers for quick shading. One of my goals for my sketchbooking in general is to work up to a point where I can lay down correct proportions and lines without a pencil sketch first. I really admire artists who can look at a blank sheet of paper, grab a brush pen, and create really full and detailed pen illustrations just like that. It's hard for me to do because I'm the type of person who scribbles a lot while trying to build up shapes and forms for my drawing, rather than knowing where to place outlines. With pencil, I can scribble around and then erase lines later, which allows me to loosen up and capture big picture ideas rather than waste time worrying about details too early on. I feel like with pen, I have to commit to the marks I want to make, which means I do have to think about the end result from the get-go. On the contrary, I do have a friend who does a lot of gesture drawings of people they see when they're out and about, and they use pen for that. Those types of drawings are quick and loose since the person you're drawing is probably walking away and you need to capture them as quickly as possible. In those instances, you don't have time to erase, so using pen helps you focus on capturing the essence of the subject without second-guessing yourself. I have started trying to use pen for figure drawings, and it's helped me get a bit more comfortable with it. I think another reason I use pencil instead of ink is because I'm kind of afraid of making ugly art. I know the purpose of a sketchbook is for it to be a place where you can try stuff out and not worry about the result, but even so, I want my sketchbook pages to look pleasing to me. With pencil, if something is ugly, I can just erase it and draw over it, but with pen, I cannot. In fact, if you look closely at the beginning of this study, you'll see that I actually drew stuff in the bottom left corner, but didn't like it so I erased it. I often think I've grown out of perfectionist tendencies, but it's stuff like this that makes me realize that I'm still plagued by them to some degree. Maybe that comes from the fear of ruining a nice sketchbook. I do feel that a bit with this sketchbook. The pages are nice and thick, so it feels like a waste if I only use pencil on it. Maybe I can channel this energy into something like, I will make the most out of this sketchbook by using ink and marker on the durable pages. Another thing I've been thinking about is how I wish I was the type of person who did things like anatomy or clothing studies in my sketchbook. I see other artists' spreads and feel inspired by the types of experiments they do in them, like they're just playing with ideas and freely messing around or honing specific skills. For whatever reason, whenever I worked on drawing sketchbooks in the past, my spreads tended to be either doodles of faces or character designs in basic poses, usually done without reference. This means that although I like how a lot of them turned out, they turned out nicely because I stayed in my comfort zone and made stuff that looked pleasing to me. Rarely would I ever do stuff like figure studies or drawing subjects I'm less comfortable with, because those don't always look as nice as my quick, easy faces. But I feel like me only drawing faces from a few set angles is hindering my growth, so I decided it was time to change that with some intentional practice. As you can see, in today's drawings I'm working on clothing folds. Usually when working on character illustrations, I just make up folds if I don't have a reference of the exact clothing item in the exact pose I'm drawing. It gets the job done, but makes the folds look kind of blobby and unrealistic. My goal is to be able to make up clothing folds in a way where they look more believable and varied. Doing studies helps you reach this because as you draw from observation, you get more familiar with what looks right or wrong, so you'll be able to make more believable marks the next time you draw that thing. Even while working on these studies, I found that subsequent ones were easier for me to approach and I could place folds more confidently than before. So, one other reason I don't love doing studies is I'm just not a patient person. I tend to doodle because it's fun and a quick way to get an idea out of my head and onto paper, and I don't spend too much time on it. Some people enjoy drawing and shading each and every crevice of their reference photo, but I simply do not. In the past, the only time I've done more detailed studies like that was if it was during a drawing class, since that's what I would have been there to do that day. I do like doing figure studies, however, since I can iterate on them quickly, so I decided to combine that approach in these drawings. Once I inked the outlines, I went in with 2 tones of markers to capture the general values of each piece of clothing. I forgot to mention it, but I'm using a Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen and 2 zebra Mildliners for shading. Anyway, using markers this way meant I could fill in large areas quickly and move on to the next piece ASAP instead of feeling frustrated at being stuck on a step I didn't want to focus on. It is valuable to do more detailed rendering practice, but that wasn't my goal for this session. The other thing I wanted to work on was my brush pen line art. Back when I primarily used watercolor for my illustrations, I focused on making line art with interesting line variation before painting, since you'd still be able to see it after adding the watercolor layer. However, as I worked more and more with gouache, I stopped thinking about interesting pre-painting line art since it'd get covered anyway, and I could just go in with paint afterwards to emphasize specific areas. But there's something so satisfying about expert brushwork. Professionals have amazing control over the brush or brush pen, so they can create thick and thin variation in lines that come out of one single arm motion. My strokes, on the contrary, tend to be short and non-committal, since my brush control is not very refined and I don't want to accidentally draw somewhere I didn't mean to. Line art can also be pretty taxing on the hand, since you need it to be steady, meaning I found that often my hand is quite tight or clenched when working on it, since I'm trying to control it better. One friend I talked to recently mentioned that she does her line art by moving her whole arm rather than just the wrist, and working on larger canvases makes that easier to do. This is another reason I want to work bigger, to get more comfortable drawing with my whole arm and not just my wrist. Anyway, those are all the thoughts I have for this voiceover, so enjoy the music and I'll check in again at the end of the video. Alrighty, here's the finished spread. I really enjoyed working on these and I'm quite happy with how they turned out. The spread on the left is actually 3 angles of the same shirt and I do wish I owned that outfit. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this sort of video, as well as if you also struggle with pen drawings. As always, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you next time.